How's it going, guys? It's AraDeek here with my Adventures Through Pop Culture podcast and YouTube videos. Thanks for joining me. Sorry about that delay. I recently got an Instant Pot as well as my copy of The Last of Us Part 2. So what that means for me is as much curry as I can physically consume, as well as running away from a clicker at full speed until I can get more ammunition for my shotgun. I'm sure a lot of you have seen online that The Last of Us is getting kind of mixed reviews here and there. I personally am only about 6 hours into it, and I really am enjoying it. I'm loving the visuals and the action, but I haven't gotten far enough into the game to really be able to directly compare it to the original. So far, the story isn't as complex as the first one, but the gameplay mechanics and the graphics have made up for it in the beginning sequences. Again, once I get further into that game, I might give you a review of it. That seems like one of those titles that might be a little harder to give a review without spoiling. So I might attempt a spoiler-free review, or I might just casually talk about it here and there to guarantee spoiler-free treatment of the video game. And that's the title that's on everyone's minds right now, as Cyberpunk 2077 is right around the corner. That game's release date, I believe, was pushed back until November at the end of this year, and if it keeps up the way it is, we will see the PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox in the holiday season as well. I personally will probably be waiting for either a second version of the PlayStation 5 or a bundled system. I really like to get the limited edition runs that have the gorgeous artwork on the system, or the engraving or the detailing with the paired controller. I have the God of War edition for my PlayStation, and I do have the Smash Brothers edition. So it's one of those things where it's almost reminiscent of the candy-colored see-through systems of back in the day, being the Game Boy and the N64 and even the old Apple computers. That kind of feeling is what I get when I get these limited edition systems. And it's always paired with a game to go with that system. So essentially you're saving $60. You're getting a cooler system that if you wanted to be one of those fiends, you could push it on eBay, I'm sure. But I'm the one who collects for myself. I don't necessarily need to collect it just to push it off. With that in mind, I am going to stay with PlayStation and not move over to Xbox. I know hardware-wise, the Xbox is going to be pushing graphically just a little more, but I'm a sucker for the PlayStation exclusives. I'm devoted to the PlayStation brand, and that controller just makes the most sense in my hands, personally. Teach their own, though, right? With all those games coming up, I wanted to feature some of the PlayStation titles that were shown in the PlayStation's E3, in place of E3 YouTube event that they had not too long ago. There's definitely some bigger titles that they showed, and I will showcase those, one in particular in detail near the end. But I am going to showcase some of those odder titles that piqued my interest, or at the very least, I might have to give them a try, see if there's a demo for them when they come out, and just get a taste for them. First of those titles, do you remember the game Pikmin for GameCube? You're essentially a spaceman corralling a slew of little aliens to help you on your adventures on this foreign planet. And it has kind of a microscopic feel to it. It feels like you're Mighty Max in this larger universe, and all these alien Pikmin are helping you to get through, to level up your spaceship, to get the parts you're missing. It's a very cute, unique, fun adventure. And it's essentially a puzzle game. Even though there is action, there is fighting of the alien creatures against more monster-style creatures on the planet, it is truly a puzzle game. Now, I love that game, and I also love Studio Ghibli, which, if you don't know, All of the Studio Ghibli collection is on HBO Max, so you have no excuse to sleep on those movies if you subscribe to HBO Max or if you have that add-on. Now, if you're anything like me and you love the Studio Ghibli films, you love Spirited Away, the Susuwatari are those fuzzy little black creatures that we saw that were almost like lemmings in the sense of there was just a wealth of them. They were just this meshy little fuzzy blob of cuteness, and you didn't even know what to think of it other than, holy crap, that's adorable. Those creatures, more or less crossed with Pikmin, are one of the main game mechanics for Kena, Bridge of the Spirits. It's an action-adventure game filled with the puzzle aspect, using both, but visually it looks very inviting, large, lush fantasy forest setting with those cutesy ally-type creatures. It's from a brother duo creating the game. This is their first foray into kind of a major platform title. And it shows a lot of prospect, not only for the younger audience, but for those that like the games like Journey or Abzu, or the games that are just a visual feast that you can kind of slowly play through and enjoy as you set certain actions into the game and watch the motion of the game and how it flows on its own after you've slowly reacted with it. For those that love the Dishonored series as much as I do, the new game from Arcane Studios looks fantastic. It's called Deathloop. Essentially, we're taking Groundhog's Day or Edge of Tomorrow or one of those time loop concepts, and we're mixing that with heavy assassin feels from Dishonored that we saw the studio produce earlier. Now, this game is it looks completely over-stylized. It looks like they're taking what they did best with Dishonored, and instead of trying to over-explain it, they've just accepted, okay, you have this teleportability, you have this badass melee as well as ranged weapon. That's just how it is. We're just going to give you that. Also, it kind of has that retro vibe of maybe a 60s mod that we did from We Happy Few, or maybe a Austin Powers kind of 60s mod, but almost a late 60s, early 70s vibe. The tone to this game looks really cool. I'm hoping that the gameplay can make it fresh and unique, and it doesn't end up being repetitive, because even though this mechanic makes for great movies, it doesn't necessarily make for the best video games. Having to play a level over and over again can get quite dreary. There are certain games that can let you rewind time just a little bit, like Prince of Persia or Life is Strange. Now, Prince of Persia was just a crazy action game that eventually led to the Assassin's Creed franchise, whereas Life is Strange is an immensely deep story that uses the time travel aspect very, very well. That game is much more about story than it is about gameplay. It's reminiscent of Telltale games in the sense of a point-and-click style adventure. This game definitely has me excited. I hope they lead more into the over-stylized aspect. As much as I love Dishonored, it did get a little dreary with its very gray tones. Here's hoping they present a much more polished, fun, and catchy title. Horizon Forbidden West. Now, Horizon Zero Dawn has a really unique story. Lots of games have a dystopian setting. Lots of games have an action-adventure fantasy setting. This kind of pairs the two to create more layers for the story and a more rich, developed story. It might be a little hard to understand all the things that are happening, but it's still, you'll understand the basics of it. I personally tried to get all of the backstory that I could, because every little piece gave you a little more of the puzzle as to the downfall of the human race and why technology has kind of taken over. It analyzes this dystopian future in a really cool way, because technology has advanced so far that it's no longer replicating what we've done or what we've trained it to do or what it's seen that we've done correctly. Now it's replicating nature, because all of these designs in nature have been working flawlessly for thousands upon thousands of years, whereas we are just fresh to all of this still. All of these mechanical beasts, almost dinosaur-like, but techno-organic evolutions of animals that we already know that have just been morphed and disfigured into these large monstrosities. It has a lot of feel very similar to Uncharted, as well as Shadow of the Colossus. And this game is actually produced by Guerrilla Games. Their studio is actually known for making the Killzone franchise, which is one of the more entertaining, story-driven shooting games for PlayStation. Now with this sequel, they're taking it to the Forbidden West that they talked about kind of in hint and in lore in the first game, and it looks like they are taking it deep underwater for certain aspects of the game for what visually look like some of the more stunning PlayStation graphics I've seen. Obviously, it's going to be coming out for the PlayStation 5, so we're going to have to wait for it, but that one looks amazing. Another kind of lesser known title, kind of a weirder title, it's reminiscent to me of maybe a kart racer, or maybe Burnout, or maybe even Destruction Derby. Pair that with the old EA Sports big games like SSX Tricky, the greatest snowboarding game ever made, and I'm thinking that's what this new game, Destruction All-Stars, is. Completely absurd, over-the-top characters and action as you're driving cars, trying to destroy one another, and there's sequences of the characters hopping out of the car, doing some sort of kind of parkour style, trying to dodge the other cars. It looks completely absurd and completely insane. I don't necessarily want to shell out the $60 for this title. I'm hoping it might just be a PlayStation Plus release, or at the very least a cheaper title, because I don't know how much deep gameplay you can get out of that. Sure, it'll be fun to play a few matches here and there, but I don't know if I could sit down and marathon that like some people might marathon a round of Call of Duty or Rocket League. Stray. Throughout the entirety of this preview, I was just glued to the edge of my seat, mainly because it's coming from a company that I know for making movies, horror and kind of indie movies more specifically, but the whole sequence, you see robots, it kind of alludes to the fact that humans are long dead, and you see this kind of cyberpunk future city filled with robots, and you keep in little glimpses of the screen seeing this little cat kind of walk through and meow, and by the end of the sequence you see the cat walk into the front. He has a backpack on and he gives you the most adorable little meow ever. The name of the game is Stray, and yes, you play as the cat. Now I know this is silly to get so excited about, but this game actually looks visually really stunning, and a super cool cat with a backpack could be really fun. Who knows? A new Ratchet & Clank title. I personally have always loved the Ratchet & Clank games, pairing platforming with shooting, as well as adult and kid-friendly humor. The humor can be quite cheeseball nowadays, but as soon as you're done rolling your eyes at the dad jokes they've dropped on you, the gameplay picks up the pace at a full speed. The preview for this title specifically, we see Ratchet & Clank jumping through tears of alternate dimensions. Now, what makes that so exciting is the PlayStation 5 is using that time of jumping in that little rift to completely generate the next world for you to hop in. That means instead of loading times, you see the visual action of you breaking a tear in the space-time continuum, much like Miss America Chavez, one of my favorite lesser-known Marvel characters, and jumping through to another dimension. Not only showcasing the power of the upcoming consoles, but the aspects of loading times no longer being a thing, and what they're going to put in place of those loading times. Insomniac also created one of the greatest superhero video games ever made, with Spider-Man for PlayStation 4. Their follow-up with Miles Morales' Spider-Man is not just an add-on to that game. It's its own complete title. Ultimate Comics were created to bring new readers into the Marvel Universe, rewriting and retelling and reimagining classic stories of Spider-Man, Avengers, and X-Men. Ultimate Spider-Man being the most popular of these titles. Eventually, they even killed off Peter Parker to make Miles Morales the key Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe. When the Ultimate Universe was eventually destroyed by our Earth's Galactus, Miles Morales was one of the only ones to escape and make his way into the Marvel Universe we know in the comic books. Originally created by Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli in Ultimate Fallout number 4, he carried on the mantle of Spider-Man in the Ultimate Comics, and after coming over to the Marvel Comics universe that we know, he carried on his own version of Spider-Man. If you want some really good Miles Morales comic books to read, I actually recommend some of the newer ones. Even though Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli created the character and had the longest run with the character, the more recent Volume 4, started in 2018 with the writing of Saladin Ahmed and art by Javier Guerrero. Now, I think these two brought a much more authentic voice, feel, and tone to this character. And if you really want to see Miles Morales portrayed, I think the way he is portrayed in video games, how he has been portrayed in the animated movie, you really need to check out these newer Miles Morales books. Also, if you want some other really good Miles Morales-based stories to read, he's in a team series called Champions, and he's also in another amazing team series called Marvel's Rising. I will be going over Marvel's Rising in one of the upcoming series because it has a few of my favorite characters of new Marvel legacy lineage on the team. Now, I know this wasn't like my normal podcast. It was more video game-tastic. I did splice in a little things here and there, but thanks again for tuning in. I'm definitely going to drop more content this week. I know it's been a little sparse here, there, and everywhere, but we are going to have some heavy drops coming up. There's tons of news that interests me, most of it obviously comic book based news, but we will have news all around. And again, guys, remember, you are awesome. Don't let anyone put you down. As long as you're bettering yourself and those around you and not hurting anyone and doing right by yourself, keep it up. Keep being the legends that you are, and I'll see you next week with AraDeek.